So now I'm going to move on to strings. And again, my experience is that there's a lot of really good recreational players that have no idea about strings. And it's, again, you don't have to spend a lot of time, but there's just some basic information that if you have, I think you can really benefit your game. So, if you go to the tennis store and, I've asked people like, what's on your racket? Oh, whatever the guy strings it with, right? Like they don't even know, right? The cheapest one, sometimes I've heard people say, right? Anyway, so I'll tell you, first of all, the string that I have right now. It's the Hyper G, right? And it's made by Solinco. It's green in color. And again, I didn't just get it because, some of my favorite players use it, or because I like the green color and it looks cool, right? I actually tried a number of different strings after I chose my racket, right? And then I decided, after playing with each of the different strings, which string worked best for me. So let's also talk a little bit about, give you a little idea about some of the criteria that you're going to want to know when you walk into a tennis shop, so that you can ask for a string that at least has some reason to fit your tennis game. Okay, so let's start with what I have on my racket, the Hyper G, right? And the Hyper G is, one of these co-poly strings, right? Which means that it has a lot of different fibers in it, but it's polyester, right? And one of the main designs behind the Hyper G is to help you hit the ball with spin. And the reason people want to hit the ball with spin is it's what gives you control out there, right? So you want to be able to hit the ball hard. Actually, you want to be able to hit the ball as hard as you can, swing full out, but put enough spin on the ball that it's not going to go long. And depending where you are in the court, sometimes you're going to have to put huge spin on the ball, right, in order to swing hard and keep the ball in play. So when you look at most of the players on the ATP Tour, they're using what we call these co-poly strings. And they're getting a lot of spin from the string, which is giving them a tremendous amount of control, right? And I always marvel at the pros, right? Sometimes you see somebody hit a short ball and they're running up at near full speed and they're getting the ball pretty close to the net, and they're still able to take a full stroke, right? And hit the ball very hard, get it up over the net and land it right in front of the baseline. And in order to do that, you have to have a lot of spin, right? And you're getting some of that spin from your, the speed of your racket, but you're also getting a lot of that spin from your string. So after trying a number of different strings, I sort of settled on this Hyper G. And let's talk about some of the reasons why I like Hyper G, and hopefully that'll help you when you decide what kind of string you want, right? So one of the things about these co-poly strings is that it allows you to swing really full out, right? And keep the ball in. And because of that, a lot of these co-poly strings are a little bit harder on your shoulder, right? That you're swinging harder, you're using more racket head speed. And when you change from, a basic synthetic string or a gut string to these co-poly strings, you may feel the strain on your shoulder, which is caused because you're just swinging your racket a lot harder than you were with the other string. So for some people, they're going to find that that's, that it causes soreness in their shoulder or in their arm. And then those people are going to have to find a string that's a little more comfortable, right? One that's still what we call co-poly with the multifilaments, but doesn't put so much stress. So for me, after trying a number of different strings, and I'll tell you some of them, right? So one of the strings that I tried was called the RPM Blast, right? Um, and one of the reasons I tried that string, and by the way, that's a Babolat string, is that that's the string that Rafa Nadal uses, of course, and he hits the ball with more spin than anybody else. And he likes that string specifically because it allows him to hit with tremendous spin and still have a lot of control. For me, that string was a little bit uncomfortable, right? That I had to swing so hard to hit the ball the way I wanted to hit it, that it would sometimes cause a little strain on my shoulder or arm. And so I went from that RPM Blast after trying that for a while, and I tried the Hyper G, and I felt like I got pretty close to the same amount of spin, but with less strain on the shoulder, more comfort. So again, you're going to select a string, and you're going to try it with your new racket, and you're going to find out, like, am I able to hit the ball with the spin that I need, that I want? How does it feel when I hit it? Is it causing my shoulder or my arm soreness? And of course, you know, a lot of people, if you're not looking to hit the ball with a lot of spin, which is the way modern tennis is played, right? Particularly baseline tennis, you can go to like a gut or a synthetic gut string, and that is a string that will not require as much arm strength. You're going to hit a flatter ball, and you're not going to have the same control that you're going to get with these co-poly strings. But again, look, you have to find the string that suits you best. And you may find that these co-poly strings that give you a lot of spin aren't comfortable for you to play with. You don't have the arm strength to do it. You don't have the racket head speed to do it. And your strokes aren't designed for it, right? So if you're hitting the ball with a very flat stroke, of course, doesn't do you any good to have a string that's designed for spin, because you're not going to get a lot of spin on your ball anyway, right? But if you're swinging low to high, and you are trying to develop spin for control, then these co-poly strings are definitely going to benefit you. So also, when you pick a string, one of the things that they're going to ask you is, what gauge do you want on the string? And I remember the first time they said that to me, and I was like, what? Gauge? What the hell is the gauge, right? And gauge, it just really has to do with the thickness of the string. And so basically, most players play with either a string gauge of 16 or 17, right? The higher the gauge, right, the thinner the string, right, and the more sort of feel that you have from the string. The lower the gauge, 16, you can actually, I think, buy a 15, but I don't think very many players play with a 15. Again, the string is thicker, it's more durable, it lasts a long time, but you just lose a lot of feel, right? So being specific about the racket that I play with, the Wilson Blade, and the string that I use, the Hyper G, I found that I can play with a 17 gauge, right? And I can still play a couple of months before I break that string. And it gives me a lot of feel, right? So that I don't need to have the 16 gauge. If I play with a 16 gauge, of course, I get more durability, and maybe I could play twice as long, 6 months, 7 months. But the truth is, I don't really want to play with the same set of strings for more than about 3 months, right? Because I feel like the racket starts to play differently after a while. The strings lose a little bit of their elasticity. They become a little deader. And even if I don't break a string after 2 or 3 months, I'm going to cut the strings off of my racket. I'm going to get it restrung anyway. So for me, the 17 gauge is a really good fit. Now, again, you know, if you're playing a lot of tennis and you have hit the ball with a lot of spin, a lot of pace, you may prefer the 16 gauge because it's going to give you a lot more durability. Probably the best player that I play with is my nephew, Marty, and he's a tennis pro. So he plays a couple hours every day. And he also uses the Hyper G string. And he likes the 17 gauge because of the feel, but he finds that he breaks a string pretty much every week, right? You know, fortunately, he has a stringer and he does his own stringing, but for some of us, you know, we don't want to change our strings once a week. It's too much for that. And so then you'd go down from the 17 to the 16 and you'd get a more durable string. So again, just a little bit about strings, right? You're going to want to know the gauge that you want. Again, I recommend that you either start off with 16 or 17. If you find that you're not breaking a string in the first 3 or 4 months and you're using a 16 gauge, then you can probably go up to a 17 gauge and get a little more feel. Again, you're going to want to know whether you want to hit the ball with more spin for control. And if you do, you're probably going to go with one of these, what we call co-poly, poly standing for polyester blends, because that's just going to allow you to hit the ball with more spin.